New Orleans Saints quarterback Derek Carr should simply take the preseason off. We got all of that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? I am your host, your friend Ross Jackson, New Orleans native, your New Orleans Saints expert and credentialed member of the media covering those New Orleans Saints as the Saints beat reporter for LouisianaSports.net, a soon-to-be launching website that I hope you will come and check out. Yes, I can finally actually say it now. I'm a beat reporter for a website, which is super exciting. So this is neat. Okay, anyway, we appreciate you very much for joining us on today's episode. Today's episode of Locked On Saints, we're going to be taking a look ahead to the Saints' first preseason game on Saturday. The Saints had a day off yesterday. They will practice today and Thursday before they travel on Friday and take on the Arizona Cardinals on Saturday. What do you need to know? We'll break it all down. We're going to take a look at what these practices for the next couple of days should look like. We'll dive into some of the big names the Saints will not face this preseason after some big news on Tuesday. And we're going to kick everything off with why I believe that New Orleans Saints starting quarterback Derek Carr, as well as a couple of other starters actually, should not see time over the preseason. I know it sounds counterintuitive, but let me explain. We got all that and much more for you coming up on today's episode of Locked On Saints. We appreciate you very much, as always, for making us your first listen of the day every day and for being an everydayer here on the show, which is a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs wants to make it easier for you to find the quality candidates you want to talk to faster and for free. So head over to linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free today. I don't believe that it's necessary for Derek Carr and maybe a few other New Orleans Saints starters to take snaps at all this preseason. I know, I get it. Oh, well, they need to get into rhythm. They need to at least have a drive together so that they're familiar with one another. And they got to figure this stuff out. And there's a new system and all this stuff. Taking any amount of snaps in the preseason is not going to help any of that stuff, especially if you're talking about a single drive. What the New Orleans Saints did last year was they had Derek Carr and the starting offense go out there, play one drive together at the very beginning of the game in the win against the Kansas City Chiefs to open up the preseason. We all went, ooh, ah, look, the offense is back. And then it wasn't. It wasn't by the time that they got to the regular season. That one drive effectively meant nothing but hype, right? And so I don't think that we need to undergo that type of situation here in 2024. It doesn't achieve anything. All that it does is put your starters at risk. Now, we broke down in yesterday morning's episode a few of the starters that we think will play. Taliesin Fuanga makes sense at left tackle. Trevor Penning makes sense at right tackle. Brand new positions for the both of them. Coming into his first NFL action in the first round picks case. There's a lot of, or this year's first round picks case in Fuanga. That makes perfect sense. I get all that. A guy like Cedric Wilson makes perfect sense. A guy like Jamal Williams might make sense. A guy like Dallin Holker, Foster Moreau could make sense. But when it comes down to Derek Carr, Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed, those guys, in my opinion, do not need snaps during the preseason. All that you're doing, Eric McCoy, Cesar Ruiz, same thing. All that you're doing is risking the health of those starters. And we have seen over and over again already this offseason that health and the New Orleans Saints are already not vibing. So let's not push it any further than it needs to be pushed if you're an NFL club. So that's the way that I look at it. Here's the other reason that I don't think that there is a lot of value in the starters getting playing time in this year's preseason. There is a new offensive system. And I think that for a lot of folks, that 1 + 1 = 2 would be there is a new offensive system. They have to run the new offensive system against an unfamiliar opponent. They need to run the new offensive system at, full speed game situation in order to get accustomed to the new system. That will not happen. The Saints are very unlikely, and there would be very little reason for them to fully incorporate their new offensive system at any point this offseason during the preseason. At most, it's going to be a watered down version. And so if you get one drive and that one drive isn't actually even the full offensive system, what did you really do to help yourself? What have you done in that situation to make your players better? no matter what, in that case, you're still going to have a week 1 where everybody's trying to get their sea legs, if you will, right? They're trying to get their legs under. They're trying to make sure that they have what they need. They're trying to get in rhythm with one another. They're trying to calibrate to one another, calibrate to the system, all that. No matter what, that's going to happen. And I just simply don't think that a drive at the beginning of the preseason is going to do that for you. Use those 2 San Francisco 49er joint practices to really work those guys. That's the chance. That's the time to get that done. You're going against an unfamiliar opponent. Things feel different, right? It's heated. The energy is up. It is faster paced. It does move faster than a typical practice. You're going up against guys that are doing things that you're not accustomed to them doing. They're responding to the things that you're doing on the offensive side in a way that you're not accustomed to them responding. And you get to practice your rules. Remember, the New Orleans Saints have instituted about 15 rules over on the offensive side of the football that teach them all how to adjust universally and together based upon how a defense changes what they're doing. Safeties rotate before the snap. Linebacker bounces outside. Shows man coverage versus shows zone coverage. Blitzer, hot, whatever. Like all these things. They'll have all these rules so that they can adjust for all of that. Do that in those joint practices against the San Francisco 49ers where you have a little bit more control over everything that's going on and you don't have the contact. The one thing that I can say that you get from playing in the preseason is that you get hit. And getting hit in many cases is helpful, okay? That can be helpful. I completely get that. And if the Saints would make that argument, I'd be all about it. But for me, the argument of getting them acclimated to the system, getting them out there so that they could all get in rhythm and kind of get comfortable with one another, I just don't feel that one drive in the preseason is actually going to give that to you. So that would be the one. That's my one caveat. Now, here's where I think one starter could be another exception on the offensive side of the football, and that's Rashid Shaheed. There could be value in getting Rashid Shaheed some of the snaps when it comes to kickoffs. With the new kickoff rule, he's still going to be the return specialist. I understand that that's still apparently a conversation out there. There's no conversation. Rashid Shaheed is an all-pro, Pro Bowl return specialist. He will continue to return kicks, much like you still see other top wide receivers around the NFL returning kicks in Miami, for just as an example. So Rashid Shaheed will be returning kicks. There is a new kickoff rule. You are going to be doing exactly what it is in the preseason in this scenario with something new that you will do in the regular season. That's where I could say, okay, there's some value. But very careful. Be very, very careful. Guys like Rashid Shaheed, Alontae Taylor, Taysom Hill, these guys have all been very involved in the kick return game while also being starters and key contributors to either side of the football. So be very careful in terms of the usage of that. Otherwise, you give guys like Jordan Mims opportunities, guys like James Robinson opportunities, especially with Kendre Miller still out at this time. We'll see if he's back at practice these next couple of days. But otherwise, that's opportunities for those guys to prove that they deserve to be on the roster or on the practice squad. And so I could see keeping them heavily involved in the kick return game as well. But I could see the value in getting Rashid Shaheed out there since that is new and what they do in the preseason will be in the regular season. So those are my thoughts. Tell me if I'm wrong. Tell me if I'm right. We'll see exactly which way the Saints go about it this weekend. Coming up next, we already know that there are some starters that the New Orleans Saints won't be playing against this preseason. We got that coming up for you as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints is brought to you by our friends at GameTime, the best place to go when you're trying to buy tickets for an event in your area, or if you're like me and you're out of town and you want to figure out if there's an opportunity for you to go and catch a baseball game, a concert, anything like that. Go straight to the GameTime app because on average, most folks save a bunch of money by going to the GameTime app as opposed to going to other ticket sales sites. You get all-in pricing so that there's no surprise fees by the time that you get to checkout. You get to see the view from your seats. They've got zone deals, flash deals, and of course, their GameTime ticket coverage and guarantee as well, which you can also go and check out. Really, really great stuff over at GameTime. John Hendricks and I use GameTime to go and buy Angels tickets. Had a blast at the ballpark, and I hope you can too. It helps you take all the guesswork out of buying your MLB tickets with GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use that promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Download GameTime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, family. Two big names the New Orleans Saints are guaranteed to not see this preseason, one of which could have a major impact in terms of the value of the joint practices the New Orleans Saints will have against the San Francisco 49ers in particular. We appreciate you very much, as always, for being here and for making us your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget to go and check out the Locked On NFL 24/7 stream, bringing you all the biggest stories from around the National Football League all day long from the local experts that know them best. You can find it on the Locked On NFL YouTube channel. Head over and check it out today. So Kyler Murray and Christian McCaffrey are both expected to not participate in games this preseason. Those are two big names that the New Orleans Saints will not face off against this preseason. Let's start off with the most recent or most, let's start off with the bigger one. I think that the Christian McCaffrey news is bigger for the New Orleans Saints for a couple of reasons. The first of which is that it is always good to be able to go against elite level talent when you get the opportunity to go up against them. Now, do you get the opportunity often to go up against elite level talent when it comes to the preseason? No, not always. But the Saints are set to have joint practices against the San Francisco 49ers, the two practices before that game kicks off next week/weekend. And so for me, that is where the New Orleans Saints end up actually probably losing out a little bit, in that they won't have to deal with Christian McCaffrey. I think dealing with Christian McCaffrey during those joint practices would have been good for the New Orleans Saints. This is per Kyle Shanahan, directly from the head coach himself, that he's dealing with a calf strain. Christian McCaffrey is. He won't participate in the preseason, and he's going to miss a couple of weeks of practice. So that should include the joint practices with the New Orleans Saints. We'll see what exactly happens. Fingers crossed he's actually healthy and the New Orleans Saints defense gets to go up against him, because I think that challenge would be particularly helpful for the New Orleans Saints. Now, they've also got Matt Breida over there with the San Francisco 49ers. So my dream of Matt Breida potentially landing with the New Orleans Saints is over, at least for now. But having Matt Breida over there, somebody that knows that system, somebody that has excelled in that system in San Francisco before, there's value there too. Do not get me wrong. Elijah Mitchell, very talented running back. Used to play in Louisiana. Seen all of it. Awesome. But not going up against Christian McCaffrey during those joint practices robs the New Orleans Saints defense of the opportunity to get better against the best. Two big concerns that you should have about the New Orleans Saints, and that many of you had about the New Orleans Saints already going into this season, centered around the offensive line, but the other part was the defensive line. The run defense in New Orleans has not been the same since the departure of Ryan Nielsen, and maybe even a tick before that when they did the whole Ryan Nielsen, Chris Richard joint co-defensive coordinator weird thing a couple years ago. And so we've seen the decline of the Saints' run defense over the course of the past couple of years. The Saints are trying to get better there. Christian Boyd has been awesome. Their big defensive tackle selection this year out of University of Northern Iowa. He's been great. A lot of fun to watch over the course of training camp. Colin Saunders has taken steps forward. Brian Brzee has taken steps forward. Nathan Shepard has taken steps forward. All three of those last guys going into their second year in the New Orleans Saints defensive interior. Those guys are the ones that you're hoping to be able to beef up a little bit or bolster the Saints' ability to stop the run. Obviously, you're also looking at the guys on the edge, don't get me wrong, but the interior was a bit of a weak point last year. So can they shore it up this year? It's looking like the Saints are in the right place. But now they might not get to test it against the guy that would have been able to give you everything that you needed in terms of every shred of confidence you needed to have, or giving you the biggest possible wake-up call that could have been very valuable for this team as well. So not going up against Christian McCaffrey is helpful, maybe, in the preseason, I understand. And in the regular season, you would say, phew, they dodged a bullet. They don't have to go up against Christian McCaffrey. But in this environment, where you're information gathering, where you're constantly working, where you're looking to constantly improve, having a barometer like Christian McCaffrey just would be so valuable. So we don't know for sure that he won't be able to participate in the joint practices. But the report, and according to Kyle Shanahan, he's expected to miss a couple of weeks of practice. we can put 1 + 1 together and find 2 here and see that it's very unlikely that Christian McCaffrey ends up participating during those joint practices. Now, here's the other side of that coin, though. If Christian McCaffrey does indeed not participate in those joint practices, and the San Francisco 49ers carve the Saints up in the run game during those practices, sound the alarms. I do think that part gives you a little bit of that reality check. It could certainly give you that wake-up call that could be valuable in that situation. So there is that side of the coin, that without Christian McCaffrey, if the run game gets to percolating, then all of a sudden, there's something to be concerned about. And that kind of answers your questions around should we be concerned about the New Orleans Saints defensive line. Though I do think that the Saints are taking a step forward with their defensive line and their new look defensive line now in a big way, as long as everybody stays healthy. Next up, and more kind of, it's not recent, but more timely, is that quarterback Kyler Murray, according to head coach of the Arizona Cardinals, Jonathan Gannon, will not participate in the preseason. So the Saints will not face Kyler Murray in the preseason. Now, for me, there's some value in facing a guy like Kyler Murray because we've seen the Saints struggle against the mobile quarterback. Now, with Kyler Murray not expected to participate, they will turn, I believe, to at least for a little while, a familiar face for the New Orleans Saints going up against former Atlanta Falcon Desmond Ritter. There's also Clayton Tune on the roster, so I would expect to see both of those guys. So the Saints would see an old friend, an old former Falcon, Desmond Ritter, and that could be a lot of fun to watch because there will be some familiarity with the quarterback there, how to get him off of his spot, how to disrupt him, all that. Dennis Allen's going to have a lot on the Desmond Ritter book, if you will, in terms of how to, even by playing a base vanilla defense, get after and maybe disrupt a bit of what Desmond Ritter is trying to do, improving his value across the NFL since things didn't work out in Atlanta. So there is that part. And look, Desmond Ritter has some mobility to his game. Not as much as Kyler Murray, of course, but has some mobility to his game. So still being able to go up against a quarterback that can move. I wouldn't necessarily call Desmond Ritter a mobile quarterback the way that I would call Kyler Murray or Josh Allen or something like that. But he is somebody that can move and that can be annoying, right? He can escape, he can extend plays, all those other things. And so giving your defense an opportunity still to be able to go up against a guy like that and be able to see some of the players that Dennis Allen himself said will be able to help against mobile quarterbacks. He specifically said that about Isaiah Foskey, who should be a big focus on defense for the New Orleans Saints. A guy like Peyton Turner and his ability to be able to contribute there, that would be big. We'll see if Willie Gay gets any run with him being brand new to the team. I know he's a starter, but with him being brand new to the team and over on the defensive side of the football, I could see him potentially getting some opportunities. And those guys in particular are all guys that at some point or another, someone has pointed to and said that person's going to help with going up against the mobile quarterback. Well, here's your opportunity, or what could have been your opportunity against Kyler Murray. Now you get a little bit of a lesser opportunity, but an opportunity nonetheless in going up against Desmond Ritter for what I imagine will be maybe a half or something like that before Clayton Tune comes in. We'll see. I mean, it's only 2 quarterbacks, so it makes sense that that's the way that they would split it up over in Arizona. So no Kyler Murray, no Christian McCaffrey. One of those cases I think is a bigger deal for the New Orleans Saints than the other, but either way, there's a lot of education to be had with both of those guys out when the New Orleans Saints face those teams, whether in the preseason or in the San Francisco 49ers case in those joint practices. Coming up next, let's dive into what we want to see from the New Orleans Saints and what the practices will be like or should be like over the course of the next couple of days. Got that coming up for you as we continue on and wrap up today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints is brought to you by our friends at LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs wants to help you find those qualified candidates that you're looking for, especially if you're a small business. You know, the stakes are always high when it comes to making sure you're finding the people that are the right fit for your culture, for your business, and of course, have the requisite experience to fill the position with success. You're only as good as the team you surround yourself with, and LinkedIn wants to help you make sure you're finding the right pieces for that team. In fact, right now, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't even use other job boards. So you know you want to be using LinkedIn, and 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours of posting their job. It's where you go to hire professionals like a professional. That is LinkedIn jobs. And right now, 2.5 small businesses all use LinkedIn for hiring and much, much more. They're making the job even easier for you every single step of the way. So post your job for free today at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. There are 3 things that I'm hoping to see from the New Orleans Saints in practice this week. And the number one thing starts off with Jake Haener, especially ahead of this Arizona Cardinals matchup this weekend. We appreciate you very much, as always, for being here with us. Don't forget, we are your team every day, so I'll be live later on today after practice. Today, Wednesday, tough day, so expect it to be a little bit later than usual, probably something around like 5:30 p.m. Central Time or so before we end up going live. Wednesday's my big meeting day with Locked On and stuff like that, so stuff's got to get pushed back. But we'll be live after practice today to give you everything that you need to know. And then, of course, a fresh episode tomorrow morning, expanding on some of the bigger topics and answering your questions. So the number one thing that I want to see from the New Orleans Saints as they get back to practice after their day off here, they got practice today, practice tomorrow, both of which in pads. The number one thing that I want to see is Jake Haener back. And we already sort of know that he will be back. He posted on Instagram and said, back at it, or back to work rather. He missed Monday's practice while he was getting a procedure that was linked to the treatment that he's receiving for the skin cancer that he was diagnosed with that is on his face. And so he got that procedure on Monday, posted Monday evening on Instagram. And so we're fairly certain that he's going to be back at practice today. And the reason why I say that I want to see him back at practice is because the preseason really becomes about Jake Haener and Spencer Rattler. That's what the preseason kind of becomes about, at least at the quarterback position. It's about much more than that. It's about guys like Jacob Kibodi and Mason Tipton and Millard Bradford make their dreams come true and land on an NFL roster. Like, let's not forget that this is about so many other players as well. And the good thing is that the teams don't have to cut players after the first preseason game anymore. You do the entire cut down from your 90-man roster to your 53-man roster and sign your practice squad after the third preseason game. So lots of opportunity over the course of the offseason for all these guys. So despite all that, though, at the quarterback spot, it's about Jake Haener and Spencer Rattler. I think Jake Haener deserves to get the first set of preseason reps. Even though for me, Spencer Rattler is the favorite to win the QB2 battle, I think that Jake Haener, as the senior player between the two, should be the one to get the first reps of the preseason. It's just a respect thing. It's a seniority thing. It's the way that most NFL teams would do it. There's no reason to stray from it right now. You give Jake Haener the first, reps between those two. Then you give Spencer Rattler the second set of reps between those two. Then you flip it the next preseason game, and then you figure everything out the third preseason game. If Derek Carr plays a series or a drive, then after that, going to Jake Haener as opposed to one half, totally fine. But that's the way that I'm looking at this, is that seeing Jake Haener back and seeing him have a big day or a big couple of days would be huge, because you want that battle to be the best that it can possibly be. You want Jake Haener at the top of his game. You want Spencer Rattler at the top of his game. If you're going to be watching these two guys duke it out to figure out, as Dennis Allen said the other day, determining whether or not they have a backup quarterback on their roster, which basically is not him doubting that they do, but him making sure that they're hearing that the competition is there, right? That's just coaching, right? And so if that's going to be the case, these two guys got to be at the top of their game. And so you want both of them at practice and healthy Wednesday and Thursday. That brings me to number 2, health. Just some health. I would love some health for this team, especially going into the preseason game. Guys like Pete Werner, Demario Davis, Marshawn Lattimore, Rashid Shaheed probably don't need to play this weekend. And so no need to rush them back to the field unless they're ready to be back out on the field. Rashid Shaheed's been an interesting one. He had the hamstring tightness. The first day that he missed, Dennis Allen said that their hope is to get him back the next day. He's now missed, I think, 3 practices and plus the day off. So ideally and hopefully he's back today. But if not, if they're just doing it to be precautious because they don't feel the need to have him in this weekend's game, I would get that. I would also understand that. So all these guys that are starters that don't have or that are dealing with injury, I get keeping them out. Again, having Shaheed go out there at some point during the preseason just to return a kick with the new kickoff return rules makes perfect sense for me. Is it completely necessary that that's the first game? No. Does he really need to practice before he does it? Yes. So it's a little bit of a trade-off there. So I think health is the biggest thing for me. And good decision making around that health is kind of a part of that too. And some of that is the making wise decisions. There's no need to have Demario Davis back out on the field. There's just no need for it. You know that he could miss all of training camp, start week 1, and still be one of the best linebackers in the NFL. There's no doubt about that. Now, Demario Davis is not going to sit out an entire offseason. He very likely will get back out onto the field. Don't get me wrong when it comes to practices and things like that. But there's no need to rush him since you don't need him in the game on Saturday. The guys that you do need in the game, though, hopefully are able to stay healthy. We just saw Chandler Brewer, who the Saints signed this offseason when they were kind of skinny on the offensive line, dealing with a lot of injuries, things like that. He just got moved to injured reserve with a triceps injury. They turned around and they filled that spot with a linebacker and Mike Rose, former UFL guy. And that gives you numbers at linebacker now. So the Saints are in good position at that position. So it's a balance of staying healthy and keeping the guys that need to be out there healthy, but then also not making bad decisions about the guys that don't necessarily need to be out there and that are dealing with injury or managing pain/injury at this moment. It's the combination of those two things for me. That's number 2 on the list. And number 3 on the list for me is situational drives. More. MOAR, more situational drives. End of half. End of game. End of half down by 6. End of half down by 2. End of game down by 6. End of game down by 2. 4th and 5. 3rd and 5. Run it all. Give it all to both Jake Haener and Spencer Rattler. Get them accustomed to dealing with the situations that they're going to face in the preseason. Now, there are going to be certain situations that you face in the preseason that you won't have completely prepared for, that you'll have only prepared for so much and things like that. Hello, surprise, it's the game of football. Things that are unexpected happen sometimes. So you can only prepare for so much. But giving these guys as many of those situational opportunities, and give them to Derek Carr too, just so that he's ready for the regular season. But any of the opportunities that you can get to give those guys those situational drills is great. We saw Spencer Rattler lead a very, very good end of game drive, getting the team that was down 2, quote unquote, in the simulation with 1 minute and 15 seconds into field goal range. Blake Grupe missed the field goal, but Spencer Rattler did his job. Jake Haener leading a touchdown drive on a down 6 type of end of half sequence the day before. Good, great, awesome. You want to see more of that. I would love to see more of that today and tomorrow leading into the game against the Arizona Cardinals. There are other things that I'd certainly love to see as well for the Saints. Getting some players back and things like that. But those are the 3 big things that I'm really hoping will work out for New Orleans over the course of these next couple of days. And drilling those situations, I think, is a big one. All right. Oh, and they will be in pads these 2 days too. So lots of physicality, all that good stuff. All right, y'all. We appreciate you very much for making us your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget, keep an eye out. Locked On Fantasy Football is balling right now, and they're doing a great job getting you ready for your fantasy football draft. So go and check them out as your second listen. And of course, go and bookmark LouisianaSports.net. We're set to launch soon. I'll give you more details when we get a final date, but LouisianaSports.net, go and bookmark it. It's where you're going to have all of the written work for me moving ahead. We appreciate you very much. As always, making Locked On Saints a part of your day, part of your routine, for saying yes to me and the show. As always, if you see me, please say hi. And if you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on your favorite social media at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing. Let me know how you're living. Let me know how you're momming them. And trust you, that nation. I'll holla at you.